Yep,
So
now we're seeing full screen, Ryan.
perfect.
Looks
We
great.
got it. We're good to go. Well, thank you everybody for having me as a guest. I'm very jealous that this community exists, and it never did when we had our business. So I'll give you everybody a little background on myself, and then I'm going to tell a little story and then talk about how to grow value with the end in mind. So I'm the co-founder of Arkona. I helped turn around a family business back into the early 2010s and turned around and sold it to a local competitor. And that gave me my mission to create the intentional growth principles and framework that we're going to be talking about today. And I started a podcast, and I've had yours truly, Jennifer, on the podcast recently. Started about 5.5 years ago, talking about how to buy, grow, sell companies and how to really create choices for entrepreneurs and their key management team members. So I believe that everybody on this call has the power to help the visionary turn their vision and yours into reality. And I think sometimes that can be a very complicated topic to figure out how to get everybody on the same page towards everybody's goals. And how I got to learn this is my dad and I, without the Christmas ad here, is my dad started our family business back in the early 90s. He mortgaged our house, bought $250,000 of used Panasonic copiers back when they were technology. And lo and behold, sold them all in the 30 days on the line of credit that we had. And I grew up in the business from day one. And lo and behold, after about 10 years, we grew to about 21 million, had 115 employees, 3 locations. And what happened was there was this time where Xerox was doing this roll up in the industry, and we started having conversations with them, and we got no offer. And we sat down and we said, well, what do we do now? Is this something that's not valuable? It's not a financial asset that we get. It gives us choices. So what happened was, at that point, my dad and I had a choice. We had been living off of cash flow, and some very good cash flow, for a long time, but we realized we didn't have a valuable business that was going to give us choices. So we could have either, just kept doing what we were doing, or we could decide to reinvest to grow value, to create options for ourselves. So over the next 5 years, I had turned around our employees. I'd fired like 25 or 100. I'd fired 55 people by the time I was 25. New ERP system. I built out the managed IT services with my team, really just trying to, out of survival and trying to, be competitive in the marketplace, and really just build something that we could have choices with later on down the road. And, by the time we got to this point in 2013, 2014, I was running the business. The executive team was reporting to me. So I was the integrator. And again, that's why I said, I wish I would have had a community like this. And my dad and I would have these conversations constantly as father, son, as business partners, as owner and president, executive vice president. And this is what it felt like. It was us, and we had all of these thoughts and really good ideas, but really, we'd sit down with, the CPA or our peer group or, our employees, and we'd have these conversations. We'd get done and say, like, what do we do to go forward? There was this competing issue where my dad wanted more money each year, and I wanted to reinvest. And when we built out the managed IT services, we're putting lots of, hundreds of thousands of dollars and millions of dollars back into the business that he would have preferred to take home. So this challenge that we came into is, what does he want long-term, and what do I want long-term as the executive vice president, and how do we align those? And we felt really trapped. And every year we were like, we're not making progress, and we're having the same conversations. So we got to a point where he said, I want out. And I went out, and we didn't really know out of what, but we knew that he didn't want to be in the same situation, and we couldn't align our goals. So what we did is we sold it to a local competitor, and we cashed out. Every single, advisor or someone that was sitting next to us would have said, you guys killed it. However, what we realized the day I sold with our family business, first of all, as the integrator, executive vice president, I'm literally part of the synergies. So what we did is I had to go back, and I had to fire 60% of my employees. I wasn't sure where I was going to land. And I was like, you know what? That was more than just the money. And how we realized that is after everybody had, this is not our office, but this is what it felt like and kind of looked like, is everybody walked out. And I looked at my dad and I said, what was that? And then all of a sudden I went from running a $20 million business to being sitting next to an intern in a cube. I was like, I really wish that would have gone a little bit different, paid a bunch of taxes and debt. And I was like, well, I wish we would have had more choices. And what we realized, it wasn't all about the money, because it was my entire life. we had, our barbecues every Friday. We had our communities and our peer groups. Stan had worked with, he was our service manager, worked with us for 20 years. We had the Minnesota Wild. So we had, as a client, so we had all of their, the concerts and the Wild games, and all of our charities were tied to the business. And we didn't realize that until the entire vehicle of this business was gone. And we realized that there was more to it than just the number. So what I realized in 2014 is that, Google Maps, if you think about your plan, long-term plans, Google Maps is a great analogy because it's one of the most powerful tools on the planet. But if we don't know where we're going, it's completely useless. You have to plug in point B. In my journey that I went through is I realized that point B is not just another revenue number, and it's not just another, a product launch or amount of employee count. And this point B, it's multidimensional. From what do you want from the business? What are your financial targets? What do you want with your role and your family and your legacy? And really putting some clarity behind that is what allows you to intentionally grow. So that way, instead of, I want to go to Florida because I'm in Minnesota, so I got this here, but you don't end up somewhere else that you don't want to be. And so the key component of this is you need to know what you want from the business and why. And I've interviewed close to 300 business owners on my podcast, a lot of privately held people for like Gino Wickman or Jack Stack or the editor of Inc. magazine. And most often we don't know what we want and why. My dad and I didn't, so we couldn't even articulate it to our advisors or the people closest to us. And I know as an integrator like I was, it was, we're selling, we're not selling, we're selling, we're not selling. I don't want this business, I want this business. It's going to be 5 years, it's not going to be 5 years. Putting some thought behind that is so crucial in order to make progress every single day and making sure that the rocks that everybody's tackling are going to make us closer towards those goals that are going to give us choices long-term. So how do we get clarity, and how do we figure out what we want and why? So a little context behind this. After 2014, I lasted 60 days at the acquirer. Great company, just not a fit for me. And I realized that I went on this it's been a 7.5 year journey trying to figure out what matters. And I've just gotten exposure to EOS and, scaling up, or, the great game of business, or strategic coach. And I realized that most of these systems have this assumption that the business owner knows what they want and why and how it all works. So what happened was, after a handful of years of consulting, I said, I respect Gino Wickman so much for the clarity that he puts behind EOS. And I wanted to do something like that from how all these concepts work. And I wanted to give the executive integrators and the owners the control to write out their journey and then implement the plans that are intentional, so that way everybody can get what they want long-term. So what are they and how do they work? And I like the word framework when we created this, is because a framework is, we all know that life and business it changes every day. Like I said, we're selling, we're not selling, we're selling, we're not selling. I want more money out of the business or I don't. And it was just constantly trying to navigate what my dad wanted and figure out what he wanted was crucial for me to organize my executive team and my resources and the strategic plan. So what I wanted to do with the 5 principles that I created with my partner is helping us understand the ripple effect of these decisions. And so these go in order. And the first one, and this is, again, we're on the 15-minute mark here for the presentation. So this is a longer presentation that we've got, and then we can give the community some resources to go in and poke around on this. But I want to lay some groundwork here, because I think the discussions that we're all having with owners, these are resources and tools to be able to help understand and help people think through what they want and how the ripple effect happens. The first principle is your drivers. So when you're sitting down with the business owner, and this is also for integrators too, is what do you want from the business and why? For owners, they don't really necessarily understand that the business is tied into their employees. Like I said, when we sold our company, we didn't realize that all of our charity activity was tied to it. All of my fun trips, the President's Club trips, and my employees and the industry community, really putting some thought behind, if I have this business or not, do I want these type of scenarios in my life? And putting some thought behind that will help us understand, what do we want long-term? Then the next principle is your financial targets. And this is geared towards business owners, and then also then tying into the executive team, because we want to all be marching the right direction so everyone can grow value and create options. And so there are 3 financial targets that owners need to identify. And, as an integrator, we have lots of integrators that go through our training with the owners. And the reality is the owners' personal financials are deeply intertwined with the business. And so the 3 financial targets that I wish I would have helped my dad identify first were, what is the annual income he needs that he wants, from his salary to the distributions? And again, if you're talking with your owner, they don't need to necessarily tell you, but they need to identify it themselves. And then the second financial target is your net worth, because the net worth is going to impact the overall options that an owner is going to have to do with the business, whether they need to maximize purchase price or not, or if they can afford to hire an integrator or a deeper bench of executives or not. And then the third financial target is the business, and that is the value of the business. My dad and I was very, very much in line with top line revenue, employee count, versus saying, instead of 20 million in revenue, what's this worth and how do we grow value? And so that leads us to principle 3, which are the exit options. And, for 5 years, I was talking about exit planning or growth and exit planning, and it's not about exiting. However, we need to understand when and how this company can be worth something to the different exit options in order to drive towards that direction. So the difference between an ESOP or a private equity recapitalization or a family transition, having some understanding that as an integrator, we can help drive value to accomplish the options that the owners want. The 4th principle is increase value. And this is what I love about the sequence, is by the time we've laid the groundwork of principles 1 and 2 and 3, people go, okay, now I get it. I want to grow value to create choices. So the more value we create, the more all the employees and the stakeholders can benefit in the future value growth. And then the choices allow owners to take care of all the people that have helped them build it. And a lot of time they feel trapped without choices. And then the 5th principle is the team of advisors. And going back to that one slide where there was things all over the place, the people and the advice, no one really understood what my dad and I wanted. And I didn't understand what my dad wanted because I didn't have these type of tools to talk about it with, and how him backing away might impact his financials, or by growing value and reinvesting, what does that do? If we would have had some sort of framework and a plan, sitting down with our advisors to help them help us is amazing, versus they're sitting down and like throwing stuff against the wall, trying to figure out what we wanted. However, if we would have said, here's what we want and why long-term, and I'm going to give everybody an example. We had an owner and his daughter, who was the integrator, come through the training. They said, hey, I think our company's worth $7 million right now. We have 70 employees. We're doing 15 million in revenue, and we're doing 1.2 in EBITDA. So it's worth like $5 million. They thought it was worth 7. And they said, well, that's not enough after debt and taxes. We'd only walk away with $2.5 million. And the owner says, well, I would have to really sacrifice a lot of things in order to get what I wanted. So they shifted their mindset and said, I want to take it from 1.2 in EBITDA to 2 million. So I can go from a $5.5 million valuation to 12. Then I can do an ESOP and everybody can benefit, instead of selling it to a strategic buyer today. So what they did is they shifted their mindset, and then they decided to grow value long-term. They took all of those thoughts and their intentional plan, and then put that into the VTO, so that they knew that their 1, 3, and 5 and 10-year goals and their 90-day rocks were growing value to create those choices that they wanted. So it just helps bring a lens and some focus to, what are we putting on the VTO and why? Are we doing the right things and spending our time, money, and resources in things that are going to benefit us long-term? I love this quote. If you don't know where you're going, you'll end up someplace else. Because that's really the truth. Most people, hundreds of people that I've talked to said, I don't know what I want. But understanding how to, segment the different components and stakeholders, and then put some intentional focus to the right things, will create the choices that you want. Because I'm under the belief that every entrepreneur, key executive, wants to do 3 things: is create wealth, have an impact, and enjoy work. And that allows us to all have choices and have a lot of fun. And the whole point is intentional growth creates choices. Because I think choices allows us to then, feel that freedom that we don't have to do anything until we want to.
Ryan, that was fantastic. And as a first-time entrepreneur with a 5-year-old business, I'm sitting on this call, so is my integrator. And I can personally say this is such a relevant conversation. Every year, as you wrap the year up and look to the next year, these are the big questions that owners and their teams should be wrestling with. So we so appreciate you sharing this with us and also staying for the networking portion. And folks, if you didn't notice, Leah dropped a link